Welcome to our December session of Your Career Plus. I'm so sorry for the delay. Although minor, I do understand no one likes delays. We had some minor technical difficulties, but it wouldn't be a remote setup if we didn't have technical difficulties. So, anyway, thank you guys again for joining us. We're so excited to have you. As a reminder, Your Career Plus is intended to bridge the gap between education and real world experiences by giving Black and Brown students access to accounting professionals who look like them and who have already gone through the journey to provide invaluable guidance that helps students navigate their path towards accounting more effectively. We want you all to be able to walk away with actionable advice that you can then use the Accounting Plus platform to help begin to implement. Today, we are very, very lucky to have Jason Treadwell. He is the president and consultant of Treadwell Consulting Group. He's also a wizard accountant, sorry. He's based in Chicago. I had the privilege of meeting him at an event that we did with EverFi a few months ago, and the students absolutely loved him and flocked to him as though he were a celebrity after the event. And so I knew that we had to have him as a guest on this webinar. So thank you so much, Jason, for joining us.
No, my absolute pleasure. Thanks, Taylor.
Okay, so why don't we dive in? Since we started a little late, let's catch up on some time. So our first question, we're so excited to have you. And so our guests know a little bit about you. Do you mind introducing yourself and sharing how you got into accounting?
Absolutely. Once again, Jason Treadwell, born and raised in Chicago. Here, currently living in Chicago. I went to DePaul University, studied accounting and finance here. And my journey, I don't think was overly unique, but I will say if there was a theme, it would be exposure. And similar to what you all that are here right now have, I didn't have your career, your career plus. However, similar to the exposure that you're obtaining, that's what sparked my interest. My dad was at the time while growing up, he had an investment club at my church, and I used to always tag along with him. And so, really, just walking around, learning about the Wall Street Journal and what's going on in business, mergers and acquisitions, and things like that. I was exposed to at an early age, and so I just always was interested. Fast forward to college, I came in as a finance major and actually wound up meeting at a recruiting event a partner at a firm who then became one of my mentors, just professionally, and still to this day is someone I talk to 20 years later. And he introduced me to the benefit of majoring in accounting. And so I wound up double majoring on the heels of his advice. And then lastly, just overall, after I graduated college, spent some time in Big 4 for a few years, worked my way up to senior, led a few projects while at Deloitte, and then went on into industry. And honestly, many of those experiences, shaped where I am now, even now as a founder of my own fractional CFO firm. So it's been an interesting journey, and hopefully we get to unpack that a little bit more, throughout this session. So I'm really excited about that.
Awesome. And yeah, you have clearly had a very robust career thus far. You've had the opportunity to work not only for different firms, but because of the nature of your business, you've been able to work with other businesses. And so I'm curious, how did you find yourself working on these kinds of projects, and how have they enriched your journey as an accountant?
Oh, absolutely. So I would say I would be lying if I said this was all by where I am now was all intentional and all by design. I think I had a lot of fortunate opportunities. Just to give a little context to that, while working in Big 4, I had a little bit of working at, the large multi-billion dollar manufacturing company. And that was nice. I had a lot of exposure. I think one of the skills that I gained while working at projects like that was an ability to understand, analyze financials, be able, talking with senior individuals and not only understanding how they operate their businesses, but also gaining insight as to how to properly audit the financials in for these organizations. Although I worked in those realms, one of the things I noticed that I enjoyed throughout my career was working for more of the mid-size or companies or startups that were like on a high growth trajectory. A lot of those engagements allowed me to be a bit more hands-on on some of everything that was going on. I was able to have a more of a better pulse as to how the organization was running. And so as I went on into industry, I did a lot of the same. One of my first jobs while leaving Ep.4 was at an alternative energy company, where one of the first things I had to do was author the fixed asset and inventory policy for the company. This was $100 million company, and this was the first thing that they tasked me with as a corporate accountant. And so it was projects like that. I was later on the IT steering committee, things like that. So although I was still closing the books, doing financial stuff, it was a lot of that project focused stuff to where I was adding value that I really seemed to thrive and really enjoy. And so really just took that upon all the way throughout my trajectory, where before starting my firm, I worked at a startup for about 6 years. And at that point, it was like the culmination of everything that I've learned up until that point. And I was solely responsible for the financial health of that organization while I was there. And so, yeah, that's how it got me here, and that's what I really enjoyed.
Yeah, that's really cool that you say that because one of the things that we try to emphasize at Accounting Plus and through our messaging is that there are a ton of ways to be successful as an accountant, and it doesn't just look like one specific thing, one specific achievement that makes you successful as an accountant. And I think that that can be true for nearly um, any career or industry that you kind of break into. I personally also much rather working for a smaller
Mhm.
team, a smaller organization, as opposed to a larger organization. And that doesn't mean that working for a larger organization is a negative. I think it all depends on what your own personal goals are and what fits best with your work style, your lifestyle, um, your personality. That's really key, right? So, so, so I really like that you mentioned that, and I'm in 100% agreement with you. And so based on that, your diverse career has included many unique opportunities in accounting. You've had roles at a public accounting firm, marketing agency, a law firm, and an energy development company. They're all seemingly very different. And so, how can accounting help people explore diverse opportunities like that, where they can also say that they've had this robust background?
Absolutely. That's a great question. I think, and honestly, I think that question is really relevant to today's time and the future. And my quick answer would be chase like adaptable skills. Chase the skill set, not so much the title or whatnot. But really, if you looked at, like, as you named those different trajectories, there was some form of skill set that I really honed in on and was able to accomplish and achieve. And a lot, again, it started for me in Ep.4, and only because I had a diverse experience already there. So when I went into other industries, a lot of that skill set chasing was more so from like a growth perspective. Okay, how can I grow? Obviously, add value, but where's the opportunity for me to grow? And honestly, I think that's what helped me. And honestly, that's what really helped me choose accounting, because I feel like overall in accounting, you have a high level of skills and skill sets that you can obtain, that you can apply in almost any and all scenarios. And so that's something I don't think we talk about enough. And that's something personally I've been taking on the champion to communicate, to students and those considering the field, that there's way more gold in going this route than meets the eye.
Definitely. And while we're on the subject of exploring unique career paths, you are
Mhm.
now in a completely different space. You're a
Yeah.
business owner. You probably have had to hire accountants to
Oh,
help
yes.
with your business.
Yes.
So can you share how you realized you wanted to work in the industry that you're in and become an entrepreneur? And how did you realize what your passion was?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think some days I'm still realizing what my passion is, in that regard. But I would say as it's a whole different ball game, especially as an entrepreneur, and but it's also fun. I think really what led me to that path was when I left that startup, just the environment I was in and how I was basically managing every aspect of the financial aspect for this company. um, I was introduced to the concept of virtual CFO just through someone that I followed on LinkedIn, and I just wanted to do a little bit more research into that. I know I really enjoyed working in the startup space. I really enjoyed working with small businesses, and I wanted to find a way that I can leverage my skill set and really kind of revisit my origin, which was in consulting, and really get back to, putting myself in a place to where I can add value. Not that I know it all, because honestly, when you're working with clients, I like to look at it as a two-way street. You've seen a lot, you can add value. However, there's a lot that you can learn. And so that part has been the biggest transition for me, is just really honing in on that. However, the challenging part of that is, as a business owner, you have to develop the business. And so that's been the good challenge that I've been more so spearheading and leading, for the organization just to grow it. And so, yeah,
That's very cool. And as you've mentioned, the beauty of accounting is that the knowledge you gain is applicable across every industry. And you can take that knowledge with you in any role that you walk into, even if you decided not to be an active practicing accountant. All of those things that you're learning along the way are still very applicable to any career path that you decide to follow, although we do want that to be accounting. But what
yeah,
advice would you give for students interested in using accounting to break into the tech space specifically? And can you also help
yeah.
define what exactly the tech industry is, since the term is used so broadly?
Oh, sure. Wow. That's okay. So we'll start with the tech space. Let me first preface this with this is not the authoritative definition of it. However, this is my experience of it. And so I would say when you think of tech, without getting too much of specifics, if you really break it down, there's perhaps really two main categories. There's hardware and then there's software. If we just break it down to its most simplest form. And if you notice, just in the industry that we're in, right? Well, just the world that we're in now, you think about, our parents or our grandparents were in like an industrial age and things like that. We're really in the tech age, to where tech in those realms, those two realms, is really leading how we're living our lives every day, And so all the way from now, all the stir around AI and machine learning to data management, even all the way down to just simple apps that we use on our phones. A lot of the things that are being created to improve one's life is in that tech space. Now, mind you, we can break that down into probably hundreds of webs, but that's how I would break it down. And so to really with the tech space, there's a couple of ways about it. First of all, I don't think you have to come in as a professional in it, meaning like you know everything about it. However, at the simplest form, start as who you are, even as a consumer. What is it that you like about it? What are the things that intrigue are more interesting to you? I know when I got into business, the leading thing that got me into business was in accounting was I wanted to learn about mergers and acquisitions. I thought it was fascinating to me. Whereas
Mhm.
now, you have the Facebooks, you have all these innovations that are happening. And so I'll say that because I grew up in an era where there was a lot of mergers and acquisitions. So when I would read the business stories, there was lots of activity in that regard. Whereas if you read now, you're going to be hearing a lot about what, the like few weeks ago, what was going on in OpenAI, where the board members, fired the CEO and then eventually brought him back on. Just keeping up with what's going on, I think is a start. I forgot that was the first question. I think I might have missed the first question
No
though.
worries, no worries. I asked you two big questions back to back. So, what advice would you give for students interested in using accounting to break into the tech space?
Okay, yep, absolutely. So I would say that last part that I said about just, have just a general understanding as to what's going on in the industry. I would, whether it's the Wall Street Journal, even if it's just a business section of the Tribune or Reddit or anything like that, just to get an understanding of just what's going on, what's really moving the news. Um, sometimes too, when you say tech, it's almost synonymous with venture capital, because they're
Mhm.
often raising funds and things like that. And so perhaps a little knowledge in that realm, I think will be key. Something I would like to say, and I don't know if we'll talk about this at any point in this, but I will say this. I want to make this point. Accounting is shifting even from a text perspective, like where I think even in my regard, you grew up being more of a technical technician, and then you kind of had to invest into really learning how to think strategically. Whereas now with machine learning and things like that, a lot of the technical side is really beginning to be taken care of, and that burden has been lifted. And I think there's going to have to be more time spent in learning how to be strategic. And what I mean by strategic is, you know, beyond the debits and credits, how do I properly analyze financial statements? What does that look like? Year over year growth. What are the things in the industry that investors are paying attention to? Those are the things and metrics that I think is worth spending time and even asking your professors more questions about, because I think the more you know in that regard, the better prepared you are for opportunities that are to come in the future.
Yeah, especially with an industry like tech that's changing literally like every hour. I mean, and
Absolutely.
it's such a sensitive um and like easily influenced industry that staying informed and making sure like whatever's relevant is top of mind, I think is going to be key in order to be successful in that field.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so I agree with you 100%. And there are tons of ways for students to stay informed and like keep a finger on the pulse of the tech industry if that's something that they're interested in. There's, like you said, talk to professors.
Yeah.
There are clubs on campus, internships that you can look into. And even earlier you had mentioned one of the ways that you started to get interested in numbers was because of your local church.
Yeah.
And you're actually the first guest that even mentioned something like that, because that is something that is so easily achievable to learn more at such a local and personal level. You'll have the ability and flexibility to make mistakes, to
Oh
really
yeah.
get in the weeds of things and really like create a very solid foundation for yourself, that as you're moving along in your academic and your career journey, all of this information that you're building on top of that will only fuel your success. So, um,
Absolutely.
yeah, so I agree with you there. I'm happy to talk about that.
Oh yeah, no, and I mean it's funny you say that. I mean, because then I guess they took note because then I became like treasurer of
Oh,
things.
sure.
I had then it be and those of us that have been involved in church, you have like a full-time job.
Yeah, no,
Okay,
now you have two full-time jobs.
exactly, exactly, exactly.
They'll
So
promote you to CFO next, watch. Um, okay, so why don't we dig into these audience questions?
sure.
So our first one is a subjective one. So answer as honestly as you feel comfortable. What are the pros and cons of accounting?
That's a good question. So yep, I would say this. I'll I'll come from maybe the perception that I often hear from other people, from the cons perspective, that you're a number cruncher, you're head down, always in the numbers and things like that. Um, However, the pros is you can take accounting wherever you want to take it. And I don't think we speak more of that, because guess what? There are people that are accountants that they want nothing more than to spend every waking moment looking at debits and credits, and that serves a purpose, bookkeepers, things like that. However, on the pro side, um, you get to kind of really manage, because there's so many ways you can go. Even in my route where I wound up in consulting, and I've crossed so many different industries. I personally was after a skill set. I wanted to grow in my knowledge of business. I wanted to understand how businesses worked. And I was fortunate enough to navigate those waters. And sometimes you do have to pay your dues. Like
Mhm.
when I was at Ep.4, I remember having to fly out to Menominee, was it Wisconsin? I think that's in Wisconsin. in the middle of the night and do an inventory count at midnight, And I mean, I had to count refrigerators and toasters, And so, I mean, that was an interesting experience. I could tell a story about. I didn't greatly enjoy it, but I did what I had to do. But I ultimately still had an opportunity to really learn what I wanted to learn. So, I mean, hopefully that helps with that.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, I appreciate you trying to put a positive spin on having to count toasters in the tundra in the middle of the night. Yeah, that is an
yeah,
interesting experience for sure.
yes,
You know what, to your point, you have to do it. Like there's just certain unavoidable things that you kind of have to experience so that uh there's an added appreciation for what goes
absolutely.
into that kind of work. So
Absolutely. And if I could add one thing to that, I think too that base knowledge now, even when I was managing teams or even in what I do, I at least know at the very base level what needs to happen and what these numbers mean. And that's
mhm.
something that can never be taken away. So there is still some value in that. That was just something I didn't want to do for an extended period of time.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I got
of
the lesson and I moved on.
course. Of course. Another audience question. Do you need a degree to break into accounting?
So that's a great question. That we can go many different directions with that. However, I would say I would highly recommend that you do get a degree in
Hmm.
accounting, just for the sake of at minimum broadening your horizons. However, you could develop a skill set even now in high school. Actually, I'm working on trying to see which one of my kids will take an interest to bookkeeping. And like bookkeeping, there are now people that offer, bookkeeping as a service to other companies that's, you can make anywhere between $300 to $500, maybe even up to $1,000 a month for a client. And, just have a really good bookkeeping skills. So that's one avenue that you can go. However, if you would like to expand and provide more value, I would definitely, venture to say that that's your best bet as well.
Awesome. Another question we have. I just graduated with my bachelor's in accounting and have, sorry, um, and haven't had time finding a job. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know why this is like blocking. I just graduated from my bachelor's in accounting and having a hard time finding a job. Do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, so I mean, without full context as to what all you're doing, I would say, first of all, don't be I mean, you're gonna have waves of discouragement perhaps while you're doing that. So I would say, continue to fight through it. The reality is, and this is kind of challenging, but the reality is there's actually a larger need for accountants than there are opportunity. I mean, there's a larger need for accountants than there is accountants. So you are in demand. I would say something one of my early mentors encouraged me is one, remain and find and be resourceful. So I know LinkedIn has options. I know, outside of Indeed, but something else too, when referring back to LinkedIn, I think we sometimes underestimate the value in just putting content out there,
Mhm.
and things that I think allows people to get to know you. And it's actually a hack that kind of I think can help you circumvent and cut across the interview process because people are
Mhm.
getting to know you online. That's just one quick thing. I would also say seek internships as well. Internships are also a great pipeline into working opportunities. And I would say start with paid internships,
Yeah.
and I know since it's the Black and brown community, and I know you say you just graduate your bachelor's, so I don't know if you're too late or too early, but I know organizations like NABA, I know there's an organization when I was at DePaul called Maha, that cater to like the Hispanic community that often also are anchors to employment opportunities as well. But I can go on and on, but those are just some quick high things I would recommend that you consider doing in your
Yeah.
search.
Definitely. And for anyone listening, Accounting Plus, we launched our scholarship and internship hub. And we work with all of our 40 plus partners, including the Big 4 that submit internship opportunities and they're paid. And, it's a great resource. But I definitely agree with you in terms of the idea of considering creating content about yourself publicly. Not only does that help cut through the interview process, but because of because of everything that's kind of going on, it's easy to get lost. And
Yeah.
so establishing and building your own personal brand will help and it'll go a really long way. And so, it's not anymore just about what it's not just about the internships that you've done. It's not just about the jobs that you've had. It's not just about your academic career. It's the story that all of that tells.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, I think that students should be um, assuming the responsibility of telling that story. And then I also think that that'll help guide them to the right opportunities for them because they're going to know who they are, what they're looking for, things like that.
Yeah.
Um,
That's great.
so I want to take one more question. We have a live audience question from Tracy. Hi, Tracy. I am a future business owner and CFO of my business. Can you tell me what the process is to start being the CFO of my company, such
Mm.
as hiring accountants, bookkeepers, etc.?
Okay. All right. That's a loaded question because we can go multiple ways. If so I think when you think CFO, and again, this is subjective, the first thought that comes in mind is strategic, strategy. And it's really the culmination of all those levels that you're talking about, but with a forward-looking view. And so what do I mean by that? So for me, for instance, one of the things that say you're starting your own company and I work with you as your fractional CFO. You have the vision, you have the goals, you have the foresight, you're driving the things forward. I come alongside you and I'm the one that's helping put that into context in regards to your finances, meaning like, okay, well, this is our current burn rate, this is where the company is going. Um, this is what the forecast looks like. I'm basically helping you put legs to what it is you're doing. So let's take that back 10,000 steps. You're saying you're going to be the CFO. So it's going to take you having a good understanding of the actual business, your operations. The need isn't often to hire all these different levels, and now you're the CFO. Sometimes depending on where you are as a company, you may only need a bookkeeper, because really at this level, you're just really keeping track, you're understanding where, your finances are currently, and you're really just operating at this level. Now, mind you, as you grow and expand, you may need a controller. A controller is more of your systems person. They're going to be the ones that helps make sure you have the processes and systems in place to kind of really handle the weight of what you're doing. So say we're going from 500,000 to 2 million, you bring in a controller. They can help you do that. Now, when you want to go from maybe 2 million to 20 million or 20 million to 50 million or 100 million, you would bring a CFO in because there's an element there where, we're getting into fundraising, we're getting into investor relationships, banking relationships, things like that. Um, so I'm trying to condense all this in one
Yeah.
little short answer for you, but that's my best stab at answering that question for you. So I'm definitely open to offline with you to kind of really unpack what that means.
Yeah, and we've shared out your LinkedIn,
Okay.
so if so folks can follow up with you to go into more detail if they feel like they need that from
Absolutely.
you.
Absolutely.
Um, we are going to go a little bit over because we have a very engaged audience. So, another question from Erica. I got into accounting for the flexibility. I'm not entirely sure what I want to do with it. How vital is a CPA certification really? Can I do anything without it?
Yeah, okay. That's a great question too. I'm trying to think about my constituents when I answer that. I will say
Yeah.
that a CPA is very vital, is very important. I kind of was preparing for this question actually all day today. Um, it is definitely vital and important. I feel like it's one of those things to where, and even the industry as a whole is going through a shift right now to where what does it mean to be a CPA? I think it's still important because it's almost like that stamp that says, hey, this person has gone through all of the education that's needed. They're, governed by a board, no different than going to the doctor's office, right? You want to
Mhm.
make sure you're being seen by a doctor. Um, and so I would say that's vital. It's not the end all be all. However, I think the risk you run into not having a CPA is you put more pressure on yourself to have this vast amount of experience to really kind of get you over that hump. And then sometimes having a CPA allows others to misread you, where they're like, hey, well, they're a CPA, they must be good. And you might not have any experience for the
Mm,
opportunity. However, there's a certain level of assurance that you have with having a CPA. In regards to the flexibility, there is tons of flexibility. Whether you're working for a firm, a lot. We were talking before we got on. Many firms and organizations have. I just saw a job like for Instacart, for instance, in accounting, and they're like I think 100% remote.
mhm,
And they have like a flexibility culture. The big thing that I think what that we're not talking about right now that I think will be come up for you is just learning how to be a professional. Ultimately, when you're being a professional, that means there are going to be days where, hey, you might only work 3 hours, but then there might be other days where you're going to work 12 hours. At the end of the day, you're getting the job done. So, without getting too much into it, Erica, there's many, many paths that you can go with the flexibility, whether you're building your own or you're working within the organization. So hopefully that helps.
I think that does help. And again, it just kind of reinforces the points that we've been making along the way that success as an accountant and success for anyone looks very different. You
Yep.
just have to really determine what it is you're trying to achieve out of your career. And then
Absolutely.
yeah, and then once you figure out what your end goal is, then you can start filling in the steps to get there. And
Yes.
so yeah, so just establishing what you want out of your life, what you want out of yourself, your career, that might be
Yeah.
the first step in
And,
deciding
and,
what your journey should be.
and if I can add real quick, like for me, I have the flexibility, and my children are in a phase where I'm doing all the pickup drop offs, and I do a lot of sporting events with them, and so it allows me I've built in the flexibility to where I can do the work that I need to do, regardless of what time that is, but I'm able to, spend these precious moments with my family while also serving clients. And so just to illustrate how it is possible, there is flexibility in this.
Yeah, definitely. So, Erica, I hope that helps. We are going to wrap. Thank you guys so much for being so active today. This was a lot of fun. Jason, thank you so much for being here, for taking the time to chat with me and to give some very, very helpful nuggets of knowledge to our listeners. We really appreciate it.
Hey, have me back. Let's get an hour in and let's get all these questions answered. So thank you again.
Yeah, definitely. And this will be an ongoing monthly series. So sign up to stay informed about upcoming live events in the new year. You can find more information on our website. You can find all of our other webinar recordings since they are all recorded. They live on our YouTube channel. So feel free to catch up on anything that you might have missed. We will see you guys in the new year. Thank you. Thank you. Stay connected with us on all of our platforms. We appreciate you guys and enjoy your